Meteorologist Tim Buckley with you now. We're talking all about Debby, of course, the tropical storm that came ashore this morning and pushed into South Carolina and sent us so many problems here in North Carolina. You know, it really was a storm that was different across all parts of the state. I wanted to show you what it looked like from space. This loop is kind of mesmerizing too, and it's always amazing what the satellites can capture. But what you're looking at are a couple of different things. We have the swirling motion of the storm center, which pushed in across South Carolina. Right now, it's actually pretty close to us in a weakened state. But you can also see some of the banding features of the rainfall. Those thunderstorms too in eastern North Carolina, some of them that turned into tornadoes for today and for us. This was when that heavy rainfall was happening earlier this morning, made it so difficult to get up and get going earlier on our Thursday. That rainfall about non-stop for 8 to 10 hours or so before it got a little bit more intermittent throughout the afternoon, and that's where we are right now. A lot of people keep saying, when is it done? Is it over with yet? And what should you expect? Well, here are the main points I have for you as we go throughout the rest of our Thursday night through tomorrow morning and beyond. Bottom line, we're done with most of the rain, but still a little bit on again, off again. Light rain, some drizzle too, is possible for the rest of our evening and into tomorrow morning. Most of this would be ending by about 4 to 5 a.m. on your Friday, and you won't have to worry about it anymore. Flooding is still an issue, but only in the places close to the rivers. Most of us have seen whatever flash flooding there was start to come to an end, and that's good news. However, the rivers, creeks, and streams all work together, and the rivers get all of that water from those smaller streams and tributaries, so it takes them a little bit while to rise up to their full levels. That's going to start to happen the rest of tonight. We're getting word from folks up in Rockingham County that the Dan River continues to rise. In Alamance County, the Haw River is rising right now, and it's a big concern. It could be at major flood stage overnight tonight, so those troubles will continue. Winds have weakened. That's great news. But there's still going to be a couple of issues with a few isolated down trees here or there. Maybe they were weakened today. That could continue through tomorrow. The power outages have gotten better. Last check, they were down to about 30,000 across the state, down from about 130,000 earlier today. Watch the storm spin as it moves throughout the Carolinas. And right now, the center of Debby is located basically across Davidson County, moving a little bit closer to Winston-Salem, Kernersville, and Greensboro. If you can imagine that, it doesn't often happen that we see the center of a tropical system move right overhead, but it is happening. This evening, you'll barely notice it. There's nothing to notice because it doesn't have wind anymore. It's just a tropical depression. Scattered rain showers are mostly sprinkles at this point across the Triad area. Maybe a little bit of light rain here moving east to west across Stokes County for tonight. Bottom line, we're not that worried about any of this rain that could still come our way. We talked about the storm center. That was the 5 o'clock position. At 11 o'clock, it'll be right about here over our area. It is still moving north and northwest at about 10 miles per hour. Now the track on this thing is pretty interesting. It's going to accelerate. Remember a couple of days ago, it couldn't even move. So back on Sunday into Monday, this came ashore in Florida on Monday. Here we are on Thursday night, and it's still right here. So it took about 4 days for it to get a tiny chunk of the coastline completed. Now it's going to be hauling up the coast all the way up to New England. In fact, all the way up into Canada. It'll go from here to there in 2 short days. So it's really accelerating with speed as it moves farther off to the north. And the flood threat will remain as it goes up to those northern areas. It's bringing a lot of the water along for the ride, and they'll have to deal with that even as we start to dry out. A little bit of a live view in downtown Greensboro. This is kind of the vibe for the evening. Very low clouds, some mist, some drizzle, you name it, we have it. It's this kind of a night. 73 is the temperature, so is the dew point. It's very muggy, as most tropical systems tend to be. Wind gusts, we talked about those earlier today. Being a big problem, this is why we had so many of those power outages across the area. So wrapping it all into a bow, what were the wind gusts actually? Well, they're pretty much in line with our forecast. We were saying around 35 to 45 miles per hour. A couple spots a little higher than that. 52 miles per hour was a surprise in Greensboro, 46 in Winston-Salem, but most of us had those wind gusts. Now, it was consistently windy, and that's when you get into trouble, when you have all the rainfall and you have those constant winds that really just aren't letting up all that much. That's when you start to get into trouble with power outages, and we certainly had that throughout the day today. This is the big headline, the rainfall amounts. We had a lot of rain. A lot of folks picked up about 4 inches of rainfall in a single day. That is not something that we see very often, but it did happen today. It's our wettest day in 6 years, all the way back to 2018, back with those hurricanes, Michael and Florence. Here's what we got to talk about going into the next couple of days. It's the river flooding question. We're talking about the Dan River, the Yadkin River, the Haw River. Those are the bigger rivers in our area that the water does flow into, and they're all expected to have a different outcome here. The Dan River is projected to have moderate flooding as we go into the afternoon on Friday. This is up in Danville. It's rising right now in Rockingham County over its banks and spots, and it'll continue to do that for Danville toward Friday at 2 p.m. The Yadkin River not seeing quite as much rainfall. Minor impacts expected over that way, but the Haw River, major flood stage as early as 2 o'clock on our Friday morning. So this is really just after midnight. It's likely to be cresting and really overflowing. And you can see why. The Yadkin River's over here. They didn't get quite as much rain. Dan River up there. Haw River is right in the thick of it. And that is where they got so much rainfall today, from 4 to 5, even 6 inches of rain. Widespread. That water has to go somewhere. And we mentioned, what's the perspective here? Well, here's your rainfall for today. It's about our wettest day since Hurricane Michael back in October of 2018. And of course, we all remember Hurricane Florence. That was the one that lasted several days with some water, but the wettest one, 24-hour period with Florence, was 4.5 inches. Not that far off from where we were for today. This storm really was significant. And you can see it here. This is just fascinating to watch back and forth. Buffalo Creek and Greensboro, always interesting to say the least when it comes to your flash floods in the urban areas. Let's take a look at Futurecast. We'll go hour by hour, starting you out right around 11 o'clock on Thursday evening. Most of the rain is done, but there is still going to be a couple of showers that move through the area. It shouldn't bother you whatsoever as you're sleeping tonight. You won't hear this. It's not wind driven, and it's not really doing much of any problems at all. Most of it will be done by 6 a.m. And then from there, you're actually going to start to see the clouds that thin out and go away. By lunchtime tomorrow, we have sunshine back across the area. That's going to be good news. Things like Sedgefield, the Wyndham Championship, for example, they of course had to cancel the play today, but they should be able to get things going for tomorrow and play round 1 just a day late. Again, the weather should cooperate pretty nicely for Friday and for the weekend as well. We do still keep our News 2 weather impact alert days until Friday at lunchtime. Why? Well, those rivers are going to continue to rise, and cleanup efforts still continue too. If you have trees in the yard, things like that, please be careful. It is still possible that some of them could continue to drop some limbs or even fall down. A cold front is on the way, and that's part of the mover that is pushing what's left of Debby up the coast. And that's why it'll be in New England tomorrow night. A very fast mover now after being so slow for so long. High pressure, it's so close. If you wanted a taste for fall, well, maybe you take a drive to Ohio this weekend. It's just not in the cards for us, but we are going to be rather dry, and I think that'll all help us out pretty nicely to dry things up. Let's talk a little bit about your triad weekend. We're going to start you off with Saturday. It'll have a low of about 70 degrees in the morning, warming up to the upper 80s, lots of warmth, lots of humidity for the afternoon. Going into Sunday, temperatures will be a little on the cooler side, right there around the mid 80s or so, and there is going to be at least a low chance of a storm. So we can't fully guarantee a totally dry triad weekend, but most of the weekend should be on the dry side. You can see here on our model, yeah, most of the rain is done tomorrow, of course, but there could still be a pop-up shower in spots, and that wouldn't shock any of us. It's just not going to be that wet, and that's what we need. So where do we go from here?